Everybody, this is going to be my breakdown of today, 10/28/2021 DFS on Fanduel. So this spreadsheet, I used to make this a lot for DraftKings, but I've actually switched it to doing Fanduel, and this is what I call my five times table. Basically, what I do is I go through each team and each player, and I find out how many times in the last 10 games. But of course, this case, there's only been 4 or 5 games for most teams. So but how many times is a 5x and 6x value in the games, the last 10 or so games? And then I just try to use that information to help with figuring out what players are usable in DraftKings today. So first of all, I'm going to go through, in this video, I'm going to go through this table, and I will be leaving a link in the description, as well as I also post this in a couple places, like on the Reddit page for DFS. But overall, I just kind of want to go through and give you a good idea of what I'm thinking about each team and kind of how you want to look at today's slate. All right, so to get into the games, there's 6 games today, and uh, um, there are a couple games that are faster paced and a few games that are pretty slow paced. And so, from a pace perspective, the Memphis and Golden State game is the highest paced. Atlanta and Washington, and then Utah and Houston. And then the other games are a little bit slower. So I'm going to go through each team and kind of give you my immediate opinion on each individual team and even some of the players in that particular team. So let's get started with the Detroit Pistons here, as you'll see in this box. All right, so today we have Jeremy Grant, who's actually questionable, and if he is out, then that's going to give Kelly Olynyk probably a pretty good opportunity. But most of these guys are going to have kind of a tough time getting to 5x or 6x today, probably because they're playing against the 76ers. Granted, if Embiid is out, that would definitely help Olynyk as well. But overall, I'm not seeing too much from this team just because of a defensive aspect and a pace aspect, and the fact that they all seem to be a little bit overpriced for what they do. Generally, I don't see too much value on that particular team today. Let's get into the Philadelphia 76ers. Obviously, with Embiid questionable, that could go either way. And obviously, he's got ability to go pretty big. If he is out, though, Tobias Harris will be probably a pretty good must play in a game against a weaker opponent. Um, Granted, he has done pretty good this season so far. He hasn't been as good as he normally is, but he does. Well, I shouldn't say that, but he typically does pretty good without Ben Simmons, but his price has also kind of gone up. But he does have a pretty high floor for a game like this. I also think that Seth Curry, who is pretty scoring dependent, is definitely going to have a low floor risk, but he also has a pretty decent opportunity today. Then if we get into Andre Drummond, um, if Embiid is out, then you're gonna feel like he's gonna have to be a player that you're gonna have to want to use because he's got a high propensity for rebounds, and he's definitely gonna get more minutes if Embiid is out. And so far this season, Embiid hasn't been out, so uh, you know we'll look to see if Drummond can really step it up in that. As for the rest of the guys, I mean, Green and Korkmaz, they would definitely benefit with Embiid out as well. But it's kind of hard to know which one of these last 4 guys are going to be like your hitters or quitters in a short slate like this, because seems like each game, just like with the Pistons, each one of them can kind of go over those marks, but maybe one of them does each game, and you just don't know which one's going to. So let's get into the Hawks. So for the Hawks, obviously Trae Young is probable. He'll probably play. Bogdan Bogdanovich is actually questionable, and if he's out, that's definitely going to up some ability for some guys like Reddish or Hunter, and then even Gallinari and Gorgie Dang. Um, my top pick for this team is John Collins. The only risk with him, like he does have a high floor, but his biggest risk is that he's only getting about 25 minutes a game, and he is maximizing his utility in those minutes. But and his price has stayed the same pretty much the entire season. But he does have a little bit of a risk because I think against Cleveland he got 26 minutes and he had 25 fantasy points. So that's kind of his like low, but he's been doing a lot better than that in most games. So uh, I do think that he's probably a pretty safe play against the Wizards. As for the Wizards, we're gonna look at obviously Bradley Beal is playing. However, he has not actually hit value once at his current price this season. His price has come down a little bit, but it seems like it's maybe a little too high still for what his production has been so far. They're just not leaning on him quite as much because they have some young guys that they're trying to get looks and things of that nature. And then, of course, we have Montreal Harrell, who actually has been playing quite well as Kyle Kuzma. And you know, feel pretty confident in those guys going against the young Cox team as well. Um, Harrell has a pretty low floor, and he's been getting more minutes, especially with guys getting injured. I know Daniel Gafford has played most of the season, and he is actually hurt, so he's going to be out today. If Dinwiddie it doesn't play today, which he probably will though, then that would definitely benefit Kyle Kuzma. But Kuzma is looking like a pretty safe play as well. He had one bad game against Brooklyn, and he had a little bit less minutes that game too, and he shot the ball kind of crappy. But he is going to get you rebounds and things like that and points most likely, so he's probably a pretty safe play as well. Most everybody else on the team, maybe if Dinwiddie is out, that might cause a little bit of an issue, but I don't think he'll be out most likely. Um, you could get something with Caldwell Pope being a good stick and play type thing like that. But let's go ahead and get into the New York Knicks. So obviously we have Julius Randle, who has been a big hitter this season so far. He's got 2 games over 60 fantasy points, which would be good for 6x. But his 2 games under are at 45 and 38. And those you do have to worry about those a little bit. And part of the reason of those 2 games was that they were kind of where the Knicks blew out the other team, and in the 2 games that he did really great in, they actually kept it pretty close, and I think that plays a lot into how many minutes how they do and how many minutes he gets. He does give you lots of points and rebounds and assists though, so like he's definitely a useful player from that perspective. If he can get a full allotment of minutes and it's a pretty close game with the Bulls, then you would suspect that he would do pretty good. However, it is a pretty difficult defensive game for him because Vucevic is not a player that's easy to play against. As for the rest of the team, I'm not really a big fan of anybody because they use a pretty deep bench. Toppin was interesting because he is 3 out of 4 in the last 4 games, but with Gibson back, he's getting less minutes. So you could also even look at Emmanuel quickly because he has he's getting about 18 minutes a game, but he had a game where he scored 25 fantasy points, but the other games are sub 10, so it's a little risky with those guys, especially in a short slate like this. As for the Chicago Bulls, obviously Vucevic has not really performed at his normal level. He is still getting the rebounds, but he's not getting his shot to fall like he normally does. And he is relying on steals and blocks and stuff in order to get those fantasy points up. His price hasn't really come down enough yet for the production he's putting up, but he definitely has the ability to have a breakout game eventually. So it's just a matter of when, I think, with him. They've got a lot of guys that handle the ball and score the ball on this Bulls team. They're surprisingly pretty good. So it definitely we're gonna have to see how the ball shakes out for the different players on that particular team. Obviously, if Zach LaVine is out today, since he's questionable, that's definitely going to make a difference in how the ball is going to be thrown around, and maybe that makes Vucevic a more attractive play. DeMar DeRozan would definitely boost up with LaVine out, and he's got a pretty safe floor today because his price is pretty fair, and he's been doing really well so far this season. He's not going to get you like a 7x game probably, but he probably, you probably feel pretty confident he's going to 5x for you. As for Lonzo Ball and Caruso, I mean, some games they're going to do well, some games they're not, and I don't really see too much else. But again, if LaVine is out, then maybe there are a couple other guys get opened up. Let's get over here to the Utah Jazz. Oops, went too far. And we'll get into what I see here with them. So we've got Gobert, who's just been a rebounding hawk first few games of the season. Obviously, they've only played 3 games, and he's been getting 16, 20, and 21 rebounds. he's got a pretty high floor if he can continue that rebounding, and if he can get more points and stuff, and some other peripheral stats like blocks, that would definitely be beneficial to your lineup. But you can feel pretty safe that he's going to get you 40 fantasy points. That's the price that he's at. As for other players, Bogdanovich, Bojan this time is actually questionable, so you do have to be concerned a little bit about him, but that could open up minutes for Joe Ingles. I remember last season using Joe Ingles quite a bit whenever Bogdanovich was out, or if Jordan Clarkson or somebody was out. And also back whenever Mike Conley was hurt some of last season. So there's definitely some advantages there. And Royce O'Neal sometimes gets a benefit too if he is out. So there's possibility there. And they're in a positive matchup with the Rockets. So the only risk there with Gobert is like a blowout. As for Houston, man, this team is a mess. Uh, this is an ugly matchup for them because it is a pace-up game because they are a pace-up team. But Utah's a very good defensive team, so it's hard to know that if any of their guys are, okay, which guy is going to be your 5X guy? I mean, Eric Gordon is a pretty good player, but he also has games where he gets under 10 fantasy points, and that's true this season. Um, then you got some guys at the bottom of the lineup that are just, they could blow up in any particular one game, but at any rate, there's not a whole lot to like at this team, so I would probably move off of Houston if I was looking at players. As for the San Antonio Spurs, we're gonna look at Potel. He is actually priced pretty fairly for what he's done so far this season. He is priced up a little bit, but still his overall play has been really solid, and he's been pretty consistent with his scoring. His low game is 26 fantasy points, which is a little bit low for what his particular price is today, but it's not so low that you're risking too much. And he did that against Denver, which obviously has Jokic. So the Mavs are also not going to have Porzingis today, so that's going to make a difference. Then if we move down the lineup, there's not a whole lot here to like really because everybody's price is kind of up. They aren't going to have as deep of a bench today because they have McDermott and stuff out, but uh, so somebody might pop off like Walker or even Brian Forbes, but I'm probably going to stay away from most of the Spurs outside of Poeltl. As for the Dallas Mavericks, obviously we have Doncic, excuse me, who is just a stat stuffing maniac, and you can't really go wrong, or you're not risking too much by picking him. Granted, his price is up to about what it averaged last season, so there's a little bit of no top. He's not gonna necessarily get you 70, but he gets you in the 50s a lot of times. Um, as for the other players, Tim Hardaway is definitely a scoring dependent guy, but he's been okay this season, but his price has come up a little bit. And with Porzingis out, then you have Finney Smith and Powell and Kleber that could all benefit. But again, they haven't been particularly great this season. And Brunson has been really good off the bench. If he can get the minutes, then his price has come up a little bit, but he's probably a pretty safe floor. That's pretty much all I have for the Mavs. If we look at the Grizzlies, you know, Ja Morant is much more expensive than he usually is, and he's playing it, but he's pretty balanced out right now at his price, so I'm not sure that he's a great play today. I'm more interested in Desmond Bane being a pretty decent floor value play, because his floor is pretty high, and he's not gonna like 7x or something for you, but he's getting about 28 minutes a game. As long as they don't get blown out, then he's gonna have an opportunity probably, and he'll probably play some even if it is a blowout, which it could be because it's like freaking Warriors. But I feel like he's pretty safe, and Steven Adams is probably not an unsafe player today either. Granted, he has one really bad game. But as for the last team today is the Golden State Warriors. Um, so Steph Curry is obviously probably the best player of the day because he's been pretty consistent this season. Though he didn't do quite as well against Oklahoma City, but they have a pretty tough point guard from a defensive perspective, and he didn't shoot the ball quite as much that particular game. But it's kind of hard to go off of Curry too much, so I think he's probably a decent play. Same with Draymond Green. Like you're gonna get that 8-8-8 type of game quite a bit from him, and that's holds true for most of the season so far. He's maybe slightly overpriced for what his production has been, but he's got a high floor, and he's probably gonna, get you a lot of that kind of stuff. Everybody else has kind of been priced up enough, so it's kind of hard to pick or choose. I mean, whoever you think of between Poole and Porter and Looney and stuff to like go nuts, then you could particularly get one of those guys. So overall, though, it's not a bad little slate. Obviously, it's a smaller slate with 6 games, but there's plenty of value and plenty of guys that you can pick and choose from today. So that's kind of my update on the particular stuff based on how they've done so far this season. And if you do have any guys that you think I've missed or you want some more information about, feel free to comment in the bottom of the video or even make a comment on the spreadsheet that I have put in the description of the video, and you can. I'll try to respond when if I see it in time. But at any rate, thanks for uh, checking this out, and if you do like this content, please feel free to like it and even hit the little subscribe buttons because I'm going to start making these a little bit more and more. And I do try to make this spreadsheet every day, so pending, obviously, sometimes life gets in the way, but I will try to do this as often as I can. But anyway, thanks for stopping by, and have a nice day, guys.